The largest reservoir in California has been turned into a weapon, not by a foreign power, not by sabotage, but by the very agency that operates it. In the mountains of Northern California, the 602-foot wall of Shasta Dam is being used to make a silent, calculated choice between two futures for the state. One has water. The other has life. Downstream, in the gravel beds of the state's longest river, an entire species is paying the price for that choice. What is happening at Shasta Lake is not a simple story of drought. This is a story about temperature. It is a story about a hidden war, fought with degrees Fahrenheit, over a shrinking pool of cold water buried at the bottom of a 4.55 million acre-foot lake. Curious what you think is a fair trade when it comes to water, because the state of California is trying to figure that out right now. To understand the crisis, you have to understand the fish. The Sacramento River winter run Chinook salmon, a species listed as endangered since 1994. They are a biological anomaly, the southernmost population of their kind, clinging to existence in a single river system. Unlike other salmon, they begin their epic migration from the ocean in the dead of winter, swimming upstream into the Sacramento River, arriving below Shasta Dam in late spring. There, they wait for the perfect moment. And for them, perfection is not about time. It is about temperature. Their eggs, the future of their entire species, cannot survive in water warmer than 56 degrees Fahrenheit, 13.3 degrees Celsius. Any warmer and the embryos suffocate in their shells. A complete generation is wiped out. Before 1945, this was not a problem. The winter-run Chinook swam far past the current dam site, deep into the McCloud, Pitt, and Upper Sacramento rivers, where the water ran ice-cold from mountain springs all year long. They had dozens of pristine, cold water streams to choose from. Then came the dam. Construction on Shasta Dam, a monument of the Central Valley Project, was completed in 1945. It blocked the salmon from their ancestral spawning grounds forever. 95% of their historic habitat gone. In its place, the dam created a deal, a promise. The massive reservoir, Shasta Lake, would become a substitute for the mountains. In its deepest parts, hundreds of feet down, a vast reserve of frigid water would collect, a cold water pool. The dam was built with a special temperature control device, a series of gates at different depths that could release this cold water downstream, keeping the river below the dam artificially chilled through the scorching California summer. For decades, this tenuous bargain held. The dam would provide water for the farms, and a sliver of that water, the coldest part, would keep the fish alive. Now, that bargain is breaking. Here is the detail that tells the real story. The temperature control device on Shasta Dam is not just a tool for conservation. It is a valve that controls the flow of money. The water in Shasta Lake is a commodity promised to the agricultural heartland of California, the Central Valley. Specifically, to colossal irrigation networks like the Westlands Water District, a 600,000-acre behemoth of industrial agriculture in the arid San Joaquin Valley. Every drop of water released from Shasta travels 447 miles south, down the Sacramento River, through the Delta, and into the canals that feed an industry worth billions. But the farmers do not need cold water. Their almond trees and tomato fields don't care about the temperature. They just need water. Volume. And so a conflict is engineered into the very design of the dam. Every gallon of precious cold water sent downriver to save salmon eggs is a gallon of water that cannot be used for other purposes, or held in the reservoir for next year's drought. This is the part the headlines do not capture. The U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, the federal agency that manages the dam, is forced to make a daily, hourly decision. Who gets the water? The endangered fish with a legal right to exist, or the powerful water districts with century-long contracts? For years, the answer has been a desperate balancing act. But as California gets hotter and drier, there is less cold water to go around. The cold water pool, once a reliable bastion, now shrinks to dangerously low levels in late summer. It becomes a choice not between abundance and conservation, but between survival and survival. And the data shows who is losing. In 2014 and 2015, during the height of a historic drought, the Bureau of Reclamation failed to maintain the required 56-degree temperature. The river warmed. On the spawning grounds below the dam, an estimated 95% of the winter-run Chinook eggs and young fry died. An entire generation cooked in the riverbed. 2 years in a row. The population crashed. Barry Nelson, a leading water policy expert who has analyzed the Central Valley Project for decades, has described these events not as accidents, but as predictable outcomes of management decisions that prioritize water deliveries over species survival. The system was operated in a way that made this loss almost inevitable. Then it happened again. In the summer of 2021, another dry year, the cold water pool was depleted by late summer. Once again, temperatures in the Sacramento River shot up past the lethal threshold. The National Marine Fisheries Service, the federal agency that oversees the salmon, projected a catastrophic loss. More than 80% of the juvenile salmon were expected to die. The canary in the coal mine, as environmental scientists call the winter run, was dying. And the dam that was supposed to be its life support system was becoming its tomb. If that were the entire story, it would be a tragedy. A story of ecological collapse driven by climate change and competing interests. But there is another layer to this crisis, a much older one, a plan that would make this problem permanent. It is a proposal to raise Shasta Dam by 18.5 feet. On paper, the logic is simple. A higher dam means a bigger reservoir. An 18.5-foot addition would add 634,000 acre-feet of storage capacity, about a 14% increase. For the water districts to the south, it is a dream, a bigger buffer against drought, a more reliable supply. But for the original people of this land, it is a nightmare. Before there was a Shasta Dam, before there was a California, the land around the McCloud River belonged to the Winnemara-Wintu tribe. The river, which they call Nur, was the center of their universe. It was home to the salmon that sustained them. Along its banks were their villages, their ceremonial sites, their burial grounds. When the dam was built in the 1940s, it flooded almost all of it, 90% of their ancestral homeland, submerged under the rising waters of Shasta Lake. The tribe, which today numbers only around 150 members, was scattered. Their sacred geography was drowned. But some of it survived. On the upper reaches of the McCloud River, above the current high water mark of the reservoir, a few critical sites remain. Puberty Rock, where generations of young women have held coming-of-age ceremonies, traditional dancing grounds, and the burial site at Cabiai Creek, which holds the remains of tribal members, including children killed in a massacre by white settlers on August 17, 1854. These are not just historical footnotes. They are active living centers of the Winnemem-Wintu religion and culture, the last physical links to their drowned world. Raising the dam by 18.5 feet would flood them all. Every last one. Chief Colleen Sisk, the spiritual leader of the Winnemem-Wintu, has been fighting this proposal for her entire life. For her, the fight is not just about historical preservation. It is about cultural survival. The McCloud River and its tributaries are sacred to us, she has stated time and again. These are places where our ancestors lived, where they held ceremonies, where they are buried. To flood these last remaining sites would be, in the tribe's view, a final act of cultural genocide. It would sever the connection between the people and their land, a connection that has already been stretched to its breaking point. The tribe, which lacks federal recognition and the political power that comes with it, has been locked in a David and Goliath battle against the federal government and some of the most powerful agricultural interests in the world. So here is the true brutal calculus of the Shasta Dam raise. On one side, 634,000 acre-feet of water, primarily for Central Valley agriculture. On the other, the last sacred sites of a people who have lived there for millennia, and the precarious survival of an endangered species of salmon. This is not a technical debate about engineering. It is a moral one. And now the story gets stranger, because there is a law that should make this entire debate impossible. In 1972, the state of California designated the McCloud River as a wild and scenic river. That act explicitly prohibits any project that would harm the river's free-flowing condition or degrade its unique values. Inundating miles of the river by raising Shasta Dam is a clear violation of that state law. The state of California, under both Governor Gavin Newsom and Attorney General Rob Bonta, has been adamant. They have filed lawsuits. They have declared they will not permit or assist the project in any way. California law forbids any state agency from even participating in the planning or construction. And yet, the project will not die. Why? Because Shasta Dam is a federal facility. The Bureau of Reclamation operates under federal authority. For years, particularly under administrations favorable to agricultural interests, the federal government has simply asserted that federal law preempts state law, that the need for water in a federal project overrides California's environmental protections. This has created a legal and political Cold War between Sacramento and Washington, D.C. U.S. Representative Jared Huffman, whose district includes parts of the North Coast, has called the project an environmental and cultural disaster that violates California law. He, along with other state leaders, has worked to block federal funding and authorization for the dam raise. But the proponents, led by the Westlands Water District, continue to lobby, continue to push. They see an opportunity to secure their future water supply, and they have the political influence to keep the $1.4 billion project on the table, a constant threat hanging over the river. This is a good moment to pause and just reflect on that. An entire system is under strain, and the proposed solution is to double down on the very infrastructure that created the initial problem, even if it means breaking state law and destroying a culture's last remaining heritage. It's a lot to take in. If you want to dive deeper into these kinds of complex environmental stories, you can subscribe. There's always another layer to uncover. Now, let's zoom out further, because the pressure on Shasta is part of a much larger, more terrifying machine. Climate change. The elegant, predictable patterns of California's climate. Wet winters, dry summers, are breaking down. The snowpack in the Sierra Nevada, the state's largest natural reservoir, is becoming less reliable. Droughts are becoming more frequent, more intense, and longer lasting. This has two direct effects on the crisis at Shasta. First, it makes the water in the reservoir more valuable than ever. When rain and snow fail to materialize, the stored water behind the dam becomes the only thing preventing catastrophe for millions of acres of farmland and millions of people. The political pressure to release that water, to keep the taps on and the fields green, becomes immense. The needs of a few thousand fish seem abstract, even trivial, compared to a multi-billion-dollar agricultural economy teetering on the brink. The balancing act becomes a political impossibility. Second, rising air temperatures warm the surface of the lake itself. The cold water pool, which relies on a stable stratification of water layers, becomes harder to maintain. The warmer surface layer deepens, pushing the precious cold water further down, shrinking its volume. In extreme heat waves, the lake can warm so much that sending any water, even from the deepest gates, isn't enough to keep the river below 56 degrees. Climate change is shrinking the supply of the antidote, just as the disease gets worse. So the system is being squeezed from both ends. Less water is coming into the lake due to drought. More demand is being placed on the water that is there, and the water that is essential for the salmon is becoming a smaller and smaller fraction of the total. The dam, once a symbol of control over nature, is now revealing itself to be subject to a much larger force. Its managers are like pilots trying to fly a plane through a hurricane, a plane that was only designed for mild turbulence. And the consequences are already rippling through the state. The collapse of the winter-run Chinook is not just an ecological footnote. It is an economic disaster for the fishing industry. The Golden State Salmon Association, which represents commercial and recreational fishermen, has fought for years for better water management at Shasta. When the salmon populations crash, the Pacific Fishery Management Council is forced to shut down the fishing season. That means thousands of jobs lost. Small businesses in coastal communities from Monterey to the Oregon border going under. A multi-generational way of life, vanishing. They see the water being diverted to the Central Valley and know that it is the lifeblood of their industry being drained away. If you know someone who cares about where their food comes from, or the health of our oceans, low-key send this video to them. It's a story that connects a single river to the entire West Coast. There is also the question of the dam's integrity itself. Shasta Dam is an 80-year-old concrete structure. Raising it is not as simple as pouring more concrete on top. It is a massive engineering undertaking on a scale rarely attempted. The project involves thickening the dam's face and raising its crest, all while it continues to hold back the state's largest reservoir. The estimated cost has ballooned to over $1.4 billion, and critics argue that even this is a lowball figure. Who pays for it? The water districts that benefit say the cost should be shared. Arguing it as a public benefit, opponents argue that taxpayers should not subsidize a project that violates state law and benefits a select group of agricultural corporations. The economic argument is as fractured and contentious as the legal one. And then there's the hidden paradox of the dam raise itself. The entire justification is to store more water. But a dam cannot create water. It can only store what the sky provides. In an era of worsening drought and declining snowpack, will there even be enough extra water to fill the newly expanded reservoir? Some climate models suggest that California's future will be defined by atmospheric rivers delivering massive amounts of rain in short bursts, followed by long dry spells. The dam raise proponents argue this is exactly why more storage is needed, to capture those massive storm flows. But other experts, like those at the Natural Resources Defense Council, argue that focusing on massive, environmentally destructive infrastructure is a 20th century solution to a 21st century problem. They advocate for more investment in water recycling, groundwater recharge, and conservation solutions that have proven to be faster, cheaper, and less destructive. But the dam raise proposal persists, a concrete ghost that haunts every discussion about California water. It represents a fundamental disagreement about the future. Is the answer to build bigger, to double down on the massive projects of the past? Or is it to pivot to a more flexible, decentralized, and environmentally sensitive approach? So, 3 questions hang over the Sacramento River tonight. First, how do you put a price on a culture? Can 634,000 acre-feet of water ever be worth the permanent erasure of a people's last connection to their sacred land? Second, in an age of extinction, when do we stop sacrificing endangered species for economic gain? What is the final line we are not willing to cross to save a creature that has survived for millennia, but may not survive another decade of our decisions? And the final, largest question: what happens when a system built for a stable climate, a system of dams and canals designed in the 1940s, is pushed past its breaking point by a world it was never designed to handle? The water behind Shasta Dam is not just water. It is a series of choices stacked one on top of the other. It is the memory of the McCloud River that was. It holds the ghosts of salmon runs that no longer exist. It holds the promise of green fields 400 miles to the south. And it holds the fate of the Winnemewintu people. It seems most people bail before this part of the video. So if you're still here, you might as well subscribe. There will be more. Right now, deep in the 4.5 million acre-feet of Shasta Lake, a thermal line separates water that can give life from water that will take it. Miles downstream, in the warm currents of the Sacramento River, the last few thousand eggs of the winter-run Chinook are developing their survival dependent on a decision made in an office hundreds of miles away. And on the banks of the McCloud River, at a place called Puberty Rock, a young Winnemewintu woman may be preparing for a ceremony at a site that could be underwater in a decade. The dam is holding it all back. The water, the history, and the future. For now.